Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, our guest today is none other than my unofficial co-host, Roy Huntington. We're going to talk about a letter we got recently. We get a lot of letters. Most of them are very positive. Occasionally we get a little poison pen letter, and this one was in regards to the single action. And of course, we're going to get you killed if we say anything positive about the single action. So that is a good question, and you're going to get to hear what Roy and I think about should you carry a single action for self-defense. So before we do that, real quick, of course, make sure you like and subscribe. And here's a quick word from our great sponsor, Armasight. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision monoculars. Built for hunters, tactical pros, and outdoor enthusiasts who demand clarity and reliability in any environment. Discover the performance and durability trusted by hunters and professionals worldwide. Gear up now at Armasight.com. Stop looking, start seeing. Roy, this'll get you killed. That's what they're saying. This'll get you killed.
This one won't.
Oh my. Well, welcome back to the podcast. And this was inspired by some hate mail I got the other day. And we get that occasionally, but it just seemed like a good topic. And we've kind of danced around this at times, but we're going to hit it head on today. And that's the whole idea of a single action for self-defense carry. So we were talking just a second ago. You said there's essentially two questions here, so I'm going to just throw it right to you.
Well, there is. And, because if you say, a single action for self-defense, everyone loses their mind and their hair catches on fire and they run down the hallway tearing their clothes off. And they threaten that you're killing babies.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But it's two questions. It's, can you carry a single action for self-defense? Sure. You can.
Yep.
But the real question, I think, is should you carry a single action for self-defense? And I think that's what we need to explore because, I was thinking about this before the show started, is that between the two of us, we probably have, I don't know, I've got 55 years of shooting, single actions from the very beginning. And, so between, we've got, 80 years of
at least, yeah.
Being policemen, seeing the results of defensive shootings, I spent 20 years editing Massad Ayub files, where some single actions were deployed successfully. Right?
Yeah.
And many, many, many articles about, defensive use of revolvers and defensive tactics. And I went to 2 or 3 Thunder Ranch classes on how to fight with pre-1900 guns.
Yeah.
And so, I think I shot SAS for a while, which ended up boring me to tears, but that's another story. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
well, I'm going to tackle the second question because I think we all pretty much agree. Can you? Well, of course. You can carry whatever, but should you? And I'm going to tackle it very simply and say, no, I wouldn't recommend it. But sometimes I like the idea, and I haven't done it, but I could see myself doing it. So let's talk about that. And so basically, if you're a new shooter or new to self-defense carry, no, don't. This is not your party. I hate to be non-inclusive, but for guys that have been shooting them a while, they're proficient in their manual of arms. They know they've got a good quality piece. They know they can hit with it. Let's talk about if you ever want to consider about carrying it. So do you agree or disagree with me on that particular point?
But no, if you're a new shooter, you certainly shouldn't because you're still going, wow, I have a gun. Look, it shoots.
I think the bullets come out of that end, I think.
Yeah. So that's a bad idea. I think something else we have to think about, too, is the demographics and the location. When I go out and I walk around my property here, I often took this little 38 Stallion revolver, I tuck that in my back pocket, loaded with some snake shot and a couple bullets, because the odds of me encountering a biker gang, are pretty remote. So, if you were on your lion hunt that you went on not too long ago, I think having a single action is, more than adequate for anything you need to do,
Exactly.
If I was in Center City, Detroit, working third watch as a policeman, probably that would be unwise to have a single action, because I think the quandary is it's appealing. We've all seen Tombstone. We've all, well, not all, but a lot of us own pretty single action guns, and I hate to see them sitting in the safe, or
right.
And you hate to see them just, I shot a target with it, and okay, now I'm going to put it back in the safe. It's like we want to be a part of that mystique, and we want to at some level feel a little bit like a cowboy, maybe. Let's just tell the truth here, and a single action can do that. I think though what you need to do is balance that with the reality of the situation,
Right.
And it's interesting because a Colt single action Army, 4 3/4 inch Colt single action Army, I don't know what it weighs. It's got to weigh 2 pounds or more, maybe more than that. And I've carried one around on a daily basis in a concealed carry holster. It gets old really fast, and so there's that reality. And if you look at the spate of concealed carry guns today, there's a common thread, right? And here is what the common thread is. Guns start off as big holster guns, right? Full size SIG P226, right? And 5-inch Colt 1911s and 7.5-inch Colt single action Armies, and they always start with these big guns. And what happens next?
They get smaller.
They get smaller, and they get lighter. Then they get smaller again, and then they get lighter again. And so if you look at what is the commodity gun in today's market, Brent, what's the commodity gun in today's market?
Yeah,
right?
The small 9, the small polymer 9.
A medium to smallish polymer 9mm, 10, 12, 15 shots. That's the gun that everyone makes, usually multiple variations of them. That's what sells. I bet you 50% of the NICS, background checks that happen, if you were able to look at it, it would say, SIG P365, Springfield Armory Hellcat, the list, Glock 40, whatever they are. And, but there's a reason for that, and that's because we covered this in a podcast one time, is that I hate carrying a gun. It's because it's a pain in the ass is what it is, and we all know that. Yep. I know that in the comments from that last podcast when we did that, it was time after time after time after time, people who were, I was a policeman for 35 years. I did this for 25 years. And they all loved the fact that we said that. Yeah. They all said, you are so right. And they all ended it with saying, that's why I carry a lightweight J-frame revolver. Yeah. That's why I carry a Ruger LCP Max. That's why, because it wears on you. But I don't know. Can you carry a single action? Sure. Should you? Let's think back a little farther, if I may. Colt initially made not initially, but he made 1851 Navy, for instance. He made the 1860 Army. He made these big black powder revolvers.
Boat anchors.
Boat anchors. Horse pistols. And they call them horse pistols because you carry them when you're on your horse. That actually comes from the old days, like from George Washington's time. They had pommel saddle, and they would carry 2 single shot, flintlock pistols. And so they were horse pistols. And so if you were facing the charging Indians in 1870, you would have had a 7.5-inch Colt single action Army if you were lucky, and a single shot trapdoor carbine in 45-70. Well, they had to fight with those guns, right? So they knew what they were doing, and they still died, but that's another story. If you notice what happened after the introduction of these big guns, there was a slew of small guns. Derringers and the Colt little 31 caliber, what were they called, 18 41s or something.
Yeah.
You know, all these smaller guns, which in today's world, people would arguably say, oh, they're mouse guns, they're all going to get you killed. But the cycle was the same, and it started back then. In the reality of the world, it's hard to carry a 7.5-inch single-action Colt single-action Army every day, right? Yeah. So I think if someone, like if we said, yes, you should carry a single-action Army every day, there would be a spate of people who would do that, and then we would see a lot of single actions for sale cheap.
Exactly. And, you know, on the historical side, I think it's one of those guns that I look at and I go, oh, man, that just makes me feel weird. But when you see the single action armies that, you know, they were called like sheriff models or shopkeeper models.
Well, there you go.
You know, 3-inch barrels. It looks wrong to me, but they were very popular for those very reasons. And okay, I get the shopkeeper. He wants to keep it in his apron or under the counter, but they were often called sheriff's models. It's because they didn't like carrying those big guns, and most of those guys realized they weren't going to do a shootout at high noon on the main street. It was going to be, even they recognized even back then, a close range, unexpected, oh my gosh, I got to shoot right now kind of thing.
Well, and it still applies. I mean, I don't know what the average sort of civilian non-sworn policeman defensive shooting is, but I'm sure it's just 2, 3, 4 shots at most.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you see those shootouts in liquor stores between 2 masked gang members and the clerk behind. They're both leaning behind the counter shooting at each other, and you see the windows breaking and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of the kind of mano-a-mano, one-on-one thing is, you're right. About the time that you think, holy cow, this is a shootout, well, it's over.
Exactly.
I mean, it really is, which is another reason maybe not to carry a single action. But can you? And that's where something we have to remember right now is that we're not talking about, if you're a SAS shooter, then you're qualified to carry a single action, as a defensive gun. You're probably more qualified than most people, because at least you can manipulate the gun, you know how to load it, you know how to unload it, you're probably reasonably safe with it. But actually fighting with them is really different, and that's why I found it to be so interesting when we went to this pre-1900 class. It was in the late 90s, I think it was, and Clinton had this idea, because he's always innovative, and he said, because he was kind of in Old West phase, as we all do that, and I still am, but he said, what can you really do with these guns? And so single actions, virtually all of them were 45 Colt, side-by-side shotguns, short-barreled coach guns, right? Lever guns, and single-shot rifles like Sharps, which if you've seen Quigley Down Under, as silly as some of it is, and could he make that offhand Quigley shot at whatever 600 yards? I don't know, maybe on a good day, right? Yeah. But he actually fought with that rifle, I thought, very realistically,
Yep.
And which goes to the should you know, but can you? Yes. Mm-hmm. If a man's got to know his limitations, right? So what we learned, though, was that we didn't do SAS shooting. In other words, it wasn't lightweight 32 revolvers, cocking with your other thumb, shooting at plates up close, and then running over there and shooting at a plate, and running over there and shooting at a plate. We actually created shooting situations that replicated real-world gunfights that we had all read about from the Old West days. Mm-hmm. And you're right, because it's usually, there's the 2 guys, one on the other side of the bar, this guy here, he's drunk, he's been throwing his weight around, somebody pulls out a single action, somebody else pulls out a single action, 2 or 3 or 4 shots get fired, the room fills up with smoke, and Emil is sitting on the ground bleeding out, asking, would you tell his wife that he still loves this guy, still love her? Right. That was a kind of a typical fight. Yeah, there were some shootouts with stagecoaches, and bank shootouts and stuff, but they were not the norm. And so we set up actual situations to try to replicate some of these shootouts. And what we found was that if you learned how to manipulate your guns, and you had two guns, there really wasn't any problem you couldn't solve.
Yeah.
And we were trying to think in modern tactic thinking.
Right.
And so concealment, cover, how to manipulate your gun, how do you load one under stress, how do you transition to another gun, that you're carrying, how do you transition to a lever action rifle. We did one that was a shootout inside of a saloon. And so he built this like saloon out of some wood, pallets and stuff. And it was nighttime. And they lit the inside with 2 or 3 lanterns. And so Clint was behind the counter, the bar, right? And you're supposed to come in, act like you were having a drink, and then from over here somewhere, a bad guy starts to shoot at you. So you have to engage him. And so it was actually smart because we had a safety officer who basically had us by our back of our shirt, because it was nighttime. You had a oil lantern in your hand, and it's like your heart was thumping. It was Clint's yelling at you. He's over there. He's over there. He's got a gun, right?
Yeah.
And so I drew, right, and cocked the gun. I held it out with the lamp. Because you had put the lamp out so you could see, right?
Yep.
And so I remember vividly as I fired the first shot. And have you ever heard that? The shooting started and the lights went out. We've all heard that, right? I never knew what is that about, right? Well, it's because we were shooting black powder. The concussive force of these black powder loads would blow out the lanterns.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And after the first shot, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Because the lights are out and now the room's full of smoke. And if you look at some of the old woodcuts from 1860s and 1870 in the newspaper and stuff, you'll see Jesse James' famous shootout in the something bar. Well, if you look there, it's like everyone's like this bent down, and there's a pile of smoke in the room. They're all trying to see underneath the smoke to see where, and their guns held up like this, right?
Yep.
And so, but that's something that we never thought of before. I know the first time we did that, it was like, oh, that was unexpected.
I bet.
We learned how you can shoot double shotguns really fast. If you watch the SAS people do it, they're like shooting a semi-auto shotgun.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They polish the chamber, so they shoot, open it, go like that, flick the empties out, double load, back in the fight, right? Well, if you use that kind of mentality with your single actions, and you use that kind of mentality with your double guns, and as we did too with the lever actions. I mean, if you've got a bad guy and he's within 100 yards and you have a lever action rifle, you can be safe.
Yeah, you own him.
I mean, that's why people say, oh, well, you have to have an AR-15. You have to have. Well, no, actually, you don't. Yeah.
As I've often said, a lot of good work got done with those old-fashioned weapons. And, another example I like to use is fast forward to 1930 and Frank Hamer. That's the most famous example. There were others, but Frank famously carried, and I can't remember, was it Old Faithful or Old Betsy or
Old Lucky, I think.
Old Lucky, maybe that's what it was. Yeah, I should have looked that up. I didn't know we were going to talk about it, but yeah, that was his gun. And here's a guy who, you talk about been there, done that, wore out a couple of T-shirts. Frank had a lot of notches on his guns, so he knew what it was like to be in a gunfight. He'd been in a lot of them. He'd been shot. The totals of people that he's had to kill in the line of duty is still disputed, I think, but there was a lot of them. And he understood the shortcomings, and he also knew that he could carry a 1911. He'd carry a double action. There were other options for him, and he chose to carry Old Lucky. So, if a guy like that can choose with all kinds of options, there's something to it. So again, I'm not Frank Hamer, you're not Frank Hamer, and somebody that's shopping for their first gun is certainly not Frank Hamer. But again, going back to can you, should you? There's some arguments for it. So
well, I think I know Hamer's son said that his dad wouldn't get up from one side of the dining room table to the other without putting Lucky in his belt,
Yep.
and that's half of it, I think, is the tactics around it, because if you're prepared and ready, then it would not be unusual for a single action to be enough for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we were there doing these little training events, we also did some Sharps rifle events, kind of Quigley-ish kind of, and you could solve a lot of problems with a 45-70 single shot rifle, but Clint developed this speed loading technique for a lever action rifle. It was really clever because you figure it's got a loading port on the right side, chances are. So if you have it, because we're all used to you put it in your left hand and then you reach down, you load it with your right, and then you rehold it. Well, he just would picture yourself shouldering a lever action rifle, and now it's time to reload. You just tilt it to the right, so now it's level, it's horizontal with the ground, and you reach in your left pocket and you load through the loading port on the bottom, like you would load a 870, for instance.
Yeah,
and we all went, we never thought of that, and so we trained to shoot 2, 3, 4, 5 shots, top off, shoot 2, 3, 4, 5 shots, top off. And so what I think I learned was, do I rely on a single action for protection? No. If I had to, though, I've learned enough that you would know how to work with the equipment that you have, The other thing I think that I learned was that you realize that, because we loaded with 5, right? If you had a Ruger, it didn't matter. We loaded with 5. Load 1, skip 1, load 4. Mm-hmm. Cock the hammer back, put it down, you're on the empty chamber. So you learn that you have 5 shots. And so your accuracy goes up. I think it was Wyatt Earp ostensibly said, hurry up, but take your time.
Yeah.
And he was right, because we tried that too. Can you fan? Nope. Never hit a single thing. It was the stupidest thing that we could ever do. Yeah. Maybe if he was 1 foot away, maybe. Yeah. But if you just took that quarter breath and aimed just that half second longer, we could hit so much better than if we tried to draw and hurry and shoot.
Yeah.
And so it really works. We also learned something else, and that I would show everybody, this is an empty gun. Everyone cocks their single actions by putting their thumb here and cocking the hammer back. Well, actually, how most of them did it was that they would actually put the whole web of their hand over it.
Yeah.
To cock. Because what we learned is that if you were in a hurry, your thumb would miss that spur really easy. Yeah. But if you reached up and basically covered the spur with that web of your hand, you could cock that gun pretty fast. So, so I don't know. Have we learned anything?
Well, I think the analogy here is, if you're a musician, we always use that as a kind of a metaphor for shooting, because it's the same. You can pick up a instrument of any kind, learn the very basics, and now you're a musician. Well, does that mean you're ready to hit the stage at Carnegie Hall? Obviously not. And the folks that are good enough to do that, they do have the best quality equipment. But the problem is that disconnect, and Americans are probably the worst, and American guys are the worst of the worst. We expect equipment to make up for our lack of skill. And to me, the single action, carrying it for self-defense, is one of those things. If you, like you said, Roy, if you're a SAS guy or you've been shooting them forever, you know these guns in your sleep, you can operate them without even looking at them. Yeah, if you want to, I can understand that. But unless you've got that level of proficiency, I would think strongly about not doing it. So,
well, because you have to learn gun handling skills, which is what we're talking about, but then also the tactical side of it, which was like they say tactics is something you do, not something you buy. Tactical,
exactly.
And so if you have the gun handling skills down, and then now know how to apply the skills you have in within the limitations of your equipment, which is what we did at these classes. It does two things. It did two things for me. Number one, it showed me what the limitations were in the real world, and I forced myself to believe that. Mm-hmm. And in other words, I didn't just blindly say, I'm going to carry a single action now because I know how to load it and shoot it. The logical side of me said, yeah, but there are really some serious limitations to that in a real world. And so you probably shouldn't. But the other side of the coin was, it gave me the confidence to know, but if I had to, I would be able to fight up to the ability of my equipment.
Yep.
Right? And which actually people should do that anyway with any gun they carry.
Yep. And that's I was just sitting here thinking, I think that's really the reason I don't carry mine. I love shooting it. I love the gun itself, but I don't feel like, from my experience of having been in that, oh no, I don't know if I could get the first shot off probably in the appropriate time. But if it turned into an actual gun fight and move, shoot, communicate, and do all that stuff, I don't know that I know the weapons system, as the modern people like to say. I don't know if I know it well enough to act instinctively and focus on what I need to be worrying about instead of, does the cylinder, how does release and turn and, all the loading gate. And no, I'm not that good. So, well,
it's like any platform, though. You're right. You do need to train. And I was there. Thad Ribka was in this class, Mike Venturino, Eddie Janis, who has passed away. But
some real duffers.
Yeah, but arguably the best single-action Colt pistolsmith who's ever lived.
Yeah.
Clint, of course, Robbie Barkman. I mean, the list goes on, right? These were people that knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
But they all were humbled by it. In other words, we would sit around the fireplace at nighttime, and then we would all talk about, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and I'm going to have to rethink the way I carry this holster. I'm going to have to rethink, that. But what something will always stick in my mind is that we spent a lot of time on a square range. The first day, we were getting up to speed. How do you manipulate these guns fast without shooting yourself in the foot?
Yeah.
How do you transition to a slung lever gun? What do you do with that if you have to put it down? How do you put it down? But I remember vividly, because it was up to us. There was no okay, load with 5. It was assumed that you were ready to go when you stepped up to the line, and then you had to stay ready to go all through whatever we were doing. And so you're always topping off, right? Because shooting single actions. And I will vividly remember, because Eddie and Thad were next to me. I was partnered up with somebody, I can't remember who, but I remember they covered one another, right? So Eddie would say, I'm down. And so, but I would hear his single action Colt. It was going click, 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 click. And he was using his left hand, and he was indexing the cylinder and ejecting with his pointer finger.
Wow.
And indexing the cylinder and ejecting with his pointer, about as fast as you can say that. And so it was going click, 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 click. And he was loading as he was doing it. And then he'd say, I'm up. And then TR would say loading. And then he was loading. And it was just like click, 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 click. And they were topped up.
Wow.
Right. And I went, wow, gosh, I still can't do that. Really.
Yeah.
Right?
Those guys could probably carry a single action and do okay with it.
Yeah. I would say, though, if you had to, I would probably get a pair of little short barreled, like this Taylor's. It's a 7/8 size single action. It's in 38 special. Mm-hmm. I would get a pair of these little guns. They're lighter and more convenient. and I would carry 2.
Yeah.
Because if you had 2 and you knew how to transition to them, you knew how to manipulate one weekend if you needed to, and all that kind of stuff, then you would be modestly well prepared if you had to. But I will say this, after having tried it, you'd have to be pretty committed to dragging 2 single action steel guns around with you. Maybe if somebody invented a titanium single action someday, I might revisit this.
There you go. Well, Roy, I'm afraid we have failed the modern gun world badly. We didn't come up with a clear-cut rule that applies every single time in every single situation. What the heck is wrong with us?
Yeah, you're right. Well, and it begs a clickbait. You'll get killed if you use a single action,
Exactly.
Yeah, but you might not. You know? Yeah.
So, I'll tell you, the last real epiphany I had was Tom McHale a couple of years ago when he said gun owners are binary. And what he means is it's either A or B. There's nothing in between. And that's why I enjoy being around folks that have been there, done that, whatever you're talking, whether it's hunting, self-defense, or competition, because they've seen the failures. They understand there's no black and white, and the real world has rough edges that don't always come where you were expecting. So I apologize if we didn't say that you need to carry this gun all the time this way, because that's not how the real world works. But
well, the real world is gray.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know when readers would they still do this to you. I know they do it to me even still. They say, "Oh, hey, what's the best gun for protecting my family at home?" And I think a lot of them hate the fact that we usually say, "Well, what do you have now?" Yeah. Well, I've got a 4-inch Model 10 38 revolver that I've had, and then when we say, "Well, that works," do you practice with it? Do you shoot with it? It's like they want us to say, "Well, you need to get this one and this magic bullet, and then everything's okay," right? Yep. We get that with the deer rifle. I'm going deer hunting in Missouri. What's the perfect deer rifle? Yeah. And I always say, "Well, what do you have?" "I've got this 243, or I've got this 308," and it's like, "Yeah, that works."
Yeah. But which bullet of the 6,000 available? Whichever one
on sale at Walmart.
Yeah. Exactly. It's where you put it and how fast you put it there instead of the equipment. So
actually, that's a very good closing line for single action revolvers.
Yep, exactly. Well, Roy, thank you so much on, who knows when folks may be watching or listening to this, but I can say the day we're recording it, it's miserable. So we're going to stay inside and hopefully not go outside and have to get involved in a shooting with any kind of gun. So appreciate you taking time to talk to us about this.
Thanks for letting me drone on there. But it's like anything, if you have all this information you have, it's hard to keep it inside sometimes. You want to share it. So.
Exactly. And one of these days we'll end a video by saying you have to do it this way every single time in every situation.
Exactly what we told you to do, or you could die.
You could die. Well, it was great having Roy Huntington on. I really enjoy our chats, and hopefully we brought up a few thought-provoking points on whether you should or shouldn't carry a single action for self-defense. Before we go, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, make sure you like and subscribe the podcast. That's how we justify what we're doing and allows us to bring you great content every week. And also, please make sure you check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. There's also that little magazine called Guns Magazine, of which I'm somewhat partial to. You can visit our website at gunsmagazine.com. And if you're looking to buy a subscription to either magazine or one of our great books, such as John Connor's Odd Angry Shot or Roy Huntington's Insider, you can do that at fmgpubs.com. You can also do it at Amazon, but I would prefer you visit us at fmgpubs.com. And before we go, don't forget our great sponsor, Armasight. Step up your game with Armasight's cutting-edge thermal and night vision monoculars. Built for hunters, tactical pros, and outdoor enthusiasts who demand clarity and reliability in any environment. Discover their performance and durability trusted by hunters and professionals worldwide. Gear up now at Armasight.com. Stop looking, start seeing. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody who works so hard here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.